What was the most wildly inaccurate thing your child has ever been taught in school? When my daughter Zoe came home from her 7th grade history class and announced that Abraham Lincoln didn't actually care about freeing slaves, and the Civil War was fought primarily over states' rights, I felt something inside me crack. Not because she was challenging historical narratives, I've always encouraged critical thinking, but because her eyes shone with absolute certainty as she parroted these phrases. "Who taught you that?" I asked carefully, setting down the knife I'd been using to chop vegetables. "Mr. Keller," she said, dropping her backpack onto our kitchen island. "He says traditional history books are liberal propaganda. He's teaching us what really happened." I took a deep breath. Ryan Keller was new to Westlake Middle School, young and apparently popular with the students. Zoe had mentioned how cool he was compared to her other teachers. "Can I see your history materials?" I asked. Zoe shrugged and pulled out a stapled packet titled American History Revised: The Truth Behind the Myths. There was no publisher listed, just a header with Mr. Keller's name and a quote, "History is written by the victors. Until now." As I flipped through the pages, my hands began to shake. The curriculum claimed the Founding Fathers never intended separation of church and state, that Native Americans had willingly relocated from their lands, that slavery had been complicated and not entirely negative for the enslaved. "Zoe," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "these aren't accurate." She rolled her eyes in that new way she'd developed, where her entire body seemed to participate in her disdain. "Dad says the same things as Mr. Keller." There it was. My ex-husband Todd's fingerprints all over this. He'd fallen down conspiracy rabbit holes after our divorce 3 years ago, his podcast subscriptions becoming increasingly troubling. I'd tried to shield Zoe from the worst of it during his weekend visits, but clearly I'd failed. The next morning, I requested an emergency meeting with the principal. Dr. Winters welcomed me with a practiced smile and motioned toward a chair. I placed the packet on her desk. "This is what Mr. Keller is teaching my daughter," I said. "It's not just historically inaccurate, it's dangerous revisionism." Dr. Winters barely glanced at the materials. "Mrs. Chen, we encourage our teachers to present diverse viewpoints. Mr. Keller has received excellent evaluations from parents." "From some parents," I corrected. "Not from me." Her smile tightened. "Perhaps this is about your own political leanings. We can't censor teachers simply because..." I couldn't fit what happens next in this short video. Watch the rest down below. What was the most wildly inaccurate thing your child has ever been taught in school? When my daughter Zoe came home from her 7th grade history class and announced that Abraham Lincoln didn't actually care about freeing slaves, and the Civil War was fought primarily over states' rights, I felt something inside me crack. Not because she was challenging historical narratives, I've always encouraged critical thinking, but because her eyes shone with absolute certainty as she parroted these phrases. "Who taught you that?" I asked carefully, setting down the knife I'd been using to chop vegetables. "Mr. Keller," she said, dropping her backpack onto our kitchen island. "He says traditional history books are liberal propaganda. He's teaching us what really happened." I took a deep breath. Ryan Keller was new to Westlake Middle School, young and apparently popular with the students. Zoe had mentioned how cool he was compared to her other teachers. "Can I see your history materials?" I asked. Zoe shrugged and pulled out a stapled packet titled American History Revised: The Truth Behind the Myths. There was no publisher listed, just a header with Mr. Keller's name and a quote, "History is written by the victors. Until now." As I flipped through the pages, my hands began to shake. The curriculum claimed the Founding Fathers never intended separation of church and state, that Native Americans had willingly relocated from their lands, that slavery had been complicated and not entirely negative for the enslaved. "Zoe," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "these aren't accurate." She rolled her eyes in that new way she'd developed, where her entire body seemed to participate in her disdain. "Dad says the same things as Mr. Keller." There it was, my ex-husband Todd's fingerprints all over this. He'd fallen down conspiracy rabbit holes after our divorce 3 years ago, his podcast subscriptions becoming increasingly troubling. I'd tried to shield Zoe from the worst of it during his weekend visits, but clearly I'd failed. The next morning, I requested an emergency meeting with the principal. Dr. Winters welcomed me with a practiced smile and motioned toward a chair. I placed the packet on her desk. "This is what Mr. Keller is teaching my daughter," I said. "It's not just historically inaccurate, it's dangerous revisionism." Dr. Winters barely glanced at the materials. "Mrs. Chen, we encourage our teachers to present diverse viewpoints. Mr. Keller has received excellent evaluations from parents." "From some parents," I corrected. "Not from me." Her smile tightened. "Perhaps this is about your own political leanings. We can't censor teachers simply because..." "This isn't about politics," I interrupted, my voice rising. "This is about facts. Historical facts that are being deliberately misrepresented to impressionable children." Dr. Winters leaned back in her chair, studying me with the kind of look reserved for hysterical parents. "Mrs. Chen, our school board approved Mr. Keller's curriculum. If you have concerns, I suggest bringing them to the next board meeting." She glanced at her watch. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have another appointment." I left her office clutching the offending packet, anger burning behind my eyes. When had basic historical accuracy become a political stance? Why was I being dismissed as the unreasonable one? That evening, I scanned the entire packet and emailed it to Dr. Jacob Whitman, a history professor at the local university and an old friend from my college days. His response came within hours. "This is academically dishonest and ethically reprehensible. Who's teaching this?" The validation fueled me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. At pickup the next day, I noticed other parents chatting in small groups. I recognized Lisa Martinez, whose son was also in Zoe's class. We'd volunteered together for last year's science fair. Have you seen the history materials your son brought home? I asked after exchanging pleasantries. Lisa's expression shifted from friendly to guarded. Yes. Finally, someone teaching the truth. My stomach dropped. You believe that slavery wasn't entirely bad for slaves? She lowered her voice. Look, Ellen, I know you're very progressive, but our kids need to hear both sides, not just the liberal agenda. As I drove home with Zoe sullenly staring out the window, I realized this was bigger than one teacher. There was a coordinated effort happening in our school, with parents not just complying but actively supporting it. That night, I created a private Facebook group, Concerned Parents of Westlake Middle. I added 5 parents I thought might share my concerns and explained the situation. By morning, the group had grown to 15 members, each sharing similar stories. Martha Reynolds wrote, "My daughter came home saying Indigenous people weren't really here first, that they migrated and took land from others, so European settlers were just doing the same thing." Carlos Domingo added, "My son's science teacher told his class that climate change is just a theory, and that the jury is still out on whether humans are causing it." The scope was widening. This wasn't isolated to history class or Mr. Keller. I arranged to meet Jacob at a coffee shop off campus. He brought a colleague, Dr. Renee Taylor, who specialized in education policy. Her face grew increasingly grim as she reviewed the materials. "This matches patterns we're seeing across the country," she said. "Well-organized groups inserting themselves into school boards, hiring specific teachers, gradually reshaping curricula. They know most parents are too busy to monitor exactly what's being taught." "What can I do?" I asked. Jacob slid a folder across the table. "Document everything. Gather testimonials from other parents and students. Then speak at the next board meeting." "Will that be enough?" Renee's expression was somber. "Honestly, probably not. These campaigns are well-funded and have been building for years, but staying silent guarantees their success." That evening, Todd called to discuss weekend plans for Zoe. When I mentioned my concerns about Mr. Keller's teaching, he scoffed. "For God's sake, Ellen, not everything is a conspiracy. Maybe you should consider that your version of history isn't the only valid one. There's a difference between perspectives and outright falsehoods," I argued. "Is there? Or are you just determined to see everything through your woke lens?" His voice had that patronizing tone he'd developed since our divorce, the one that made me question my own perceptions. "Zoe tells me you're causing problems at school. Let it go. You're embarrassing our daughter." After hanging up, I found Zoe standing in the hallway, arms crossed. "Why are you trying to get Mr. Keller fired?" she demanded. "Everyone at school is talking about how my mom is a crazy liberal trying to cancel their favorite teacher." My heart sank. "Zoe, I'm not trying to get anyone fired. I'm concerned about misinformation. It's not misinformation just because you don't agree with it," she snapped, parroting phrases I'd heard from Todd. "You're always talking about keeping an open mind, but you freak out the second someone challenges your beliefs." Before I could respond, she stomped to her room and slammed the door. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my laptop screen where testimonials from concerned parents filled my inbox. The school board meeting was in 2 days. I would be speaking out, potentially making myself a target in our increasingly divided community. And my own daughter might never forgive me. The night of the board meeting arrived with a knot in my stomach. The elementary school gymnasium was packed, buzzing with tension. I recognized faces from both sides of the issue. The parents from my Facebook group huddled near the front, and opposite them, a larger contingent that included Lisa Martinez and several parents I'd seen at PTA meetings but never really spoken to. Ryan Keller sat with the latter group, younger than I'd imagined, with a clean-cut appearance and confident smile. Our eyes met briefly as I found my seat. He didn't look like someone peddling harmful ideologies. He looked like the popular teacher Zoe had described, charming, assured, someone who made kids feel like they were being let in on secret knowledge. The board president called the meeting to order and began with routine business. My hands grew sweaty as they worked through the agenda items. Finally, they opened the floor for public comments. "First speaker, Ellen Chen," the board president announced. I walked to the microphone, acutely aware of the rustle of tension that spread through the room. Setting my notes on the podium, I looked up at the 7 board members, 4 men, 3 women, all watching me with expressions ranging from boredom to thinly veiled hostility. Only one, Maria Gonzalez, offered an encouraging nod. "My name is Ellen Chen," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "My daughter attends 7th grade at Westlake Middle. I'm here because I'm deeply concerned about factually inaccurate material being presented as historical truth in our children's classrooms." I held up Mr. Keller's packet. This curriculum material claims, among other things, that slavery had benefits for the enslaved, that the separation of church and state was never intended by the founders, and that Native Americans voluntarily gave up their lands. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I pressed on. "These aren't alternate perspectives or different interpretations. They are demonstrably false claims contradicted by primary historical documents and the consensus of historical scholarship." From the corner of my eye, I saw Mr. Keller whispering to Lisa Martinez, both smirking slightly. "I've had these materials reviewed by historians who confirm they contain significant factual errors and misleading characterizations. But beyond the academic issues, I'm concerned about the moral implications of teaching our children distorted history that minimizes historical injustices." The board president glanced at his watch. "Your time is almost up, Ms. Chen." I hadn't even gotten to the testimonials or Dr. Whitman's analysis. "I've submitted a complete report to the board secretary, along with statements from 15 other concerned parents and expert opinions from..." Thank you, Ms. Chen. Your time is up. He cut me off with practiced efficiency. Next speaker, Thomas Rutledge. A tall man in a crisp blue suit approached the microphone as I returned to my seat. I recognized him as the father of one of Zoe's classmates and the owner of several car dealerships whose advertisements dominated local radio. Good evening, board members, he began with an easy confidence. I'm here representing Parents for Educational Freedom, a coalition of over 200 local parents. 200? Our group barely had 30. We stand firmly behind our teachers' academic freedom to present historical events from multiple perspectives. What Ms. Chen calls factually inaccurate is simply history that doesn't conform to a progressive narrative. The crowd behind him erupted in applause. The board president made no move to silence them as he had when two of my supporters had tried to clap after my speech. Our children deserve to hear all sides, not just the politically correct version mandated by coastal elites and university professors who've never worked a real job. More applause, louder this time. We're proud of teachers like Ryan Keller who have the courage to challenge orthodoxy and present the complexities of history. If certain parents are uncomfortable with viewpoint diversity, perhaps public education isn't the right choice for their families. The threat was thinly veiled but unmistakable. Get in line or get out. When the meeting ended 2 hours later, the outcome was clear. The board voted 5-2 to review the concerns but took no immediate action. Maria Gonzalez and another member, James Wilson, were the only dissenting votes. As the crowd dispersed, Keller approached me, extending his hand. Ms. Chen, I respect your passion, but I think you misunderstand my approach. I'm simply encouraging critical thinking. Critical thinking requires accurate information to analyze, I replied, ignoring his outstretched hand. Not fabrications designed to support a political agenda. His smile didn't waver. You might be surprised to learn how many facts in standard textbooks don't hold up to scrutiny, but I understand your concern. Perhaps we could meet sometime to discuss the curriculum further? I'd welcome that, I said, though something in his eyes, a cold calculation beneath the friendly demeanor, made me doubt his sincerity. Excellent. I believe in dialogue across differences. He glanced over my shoulder. Ah, Zoe, wonderful presentation in class today. I turned to see my daughter approaching, her expression a mix of embarrassment and defiance. Mr. Keller, she mumbled, not meeting my eyes. Your mother and I were just discussing alternative perspectives in history education. It's important to remain open-minded, isn't it? Zoe nodded, still looking at the floor. I should go, Keller said. But Ms. Chen, I look forward to our discussion. He walked away, leaving an awkward silence between Zoe and me. Can we just go home? She asked. The drive was silent. When we arrived, Zoe headed straight for her room, but I called after her. We need to talk about this, Zoe. She turned, arms crossed defensively. About how you humiliated me in front of the whole school? About how everyone's going to be whispering about my crazy mom tomorrow? About historical accuracy, I corrected gently. About why it matters. Dad says you're obsessed with being right and can't stand anyone challenging your worldview. I bit back a sharp response. Todd's voice was coming through our daughter's mouth, and arguing would only push her further into his camp. I understand it feels that way, I said carefully, but this isn't about opinions or worldviews. It's about verifiable facts. So everyone who disagrees with you is just wrong? She shook her head. That's exactly what Dad said you'd say. Zoe, history isn't... I'm tired. Can we talk tomorrow? Without waiting for an answer, she disappeared into her room. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. The Facebook group was buzzing with post-meeting reactions, ranging from disappointment to determined strategizing. But a private message from an unfamiliar name caught my attention. You don't know me. I teach English at Westlake. What you're seeing with Keller is just the surface. There's more happening. Much more. Meet me at Riverside Park, North Entrance, tomorrow at 4:30 if you want to know the truth. After a sleepless night, I dropped Zoe at school, avoiding eye contact with the other parents, some of whom whispered as I drove away. The workday passed in a blur. I'm a graphic designer for a local marketing firm, and I found myself staring blankly at the same logo revision for nearly an hour, my mind replaying the board meeting and Zoe's angry words. At 4:15, I parked at Riverside Park, second-guessing my decision to meet an anonymous source. What if it was a setup? What if Keller's supporters were planning something? I almost drove away, but curiosity won out. I walked to the north entrance, scanning for anyone who looked like they might be a Westlake teacher. Ms. Chen? I turned to see a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and practical clothes, clutching a coffee thermos. I'm Rebecca Donovan, English department. She gestured toward a bench away from the main path. Thank you for coming. We sat, and she glanced around nervously before speaking. What's happening at Westlake isn't random. Keller was hired specifically to implement this new curriculum. Dr. Winters knew exactly what she was getting. How do you know this? I sit on the hiring committee. We had qualified candidates with actual teaching experience, but the board pushed Keller through despite concerns from veteran teachers. He had no classroom experience, but came with glowing recommendations from something called the Freedom Education Initiative. She pulled out her phone and showed me an email. This came from the superintendent's office just before Keller was hired. It outlined the new instructional approach for history, science, and literature, essentially reframing everything through a specific ideological lens. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Why not speak up yourself? Rebecca's lips tightened. I'm 3 years from retirement. I need my pension. And I'm not the only one being silent out of fear. Last year, 3 teachers who pushed back against similar changes were put on improvement plans for failing to comply with approved curricula. 2 were gone by Christmas. She handed me the thermos. Take this. The flash drive inside has copies of emails, the new curriculum guidelines for multiple subjects, and the names of the organizations funding these changes. They're targeting districts like ours, moderate communities in swing states where small shifts in educational content can change how a generation thinks. I held the thermos, suddenly understanding the weight of what I was being handed. This could cost you your job. It could cost our students much more if no one stands up. She stood to leave. Be careful who you trust with this information. The network behind these changes is extensive. They have people in the local media, the PTA, even the sheriff's office. What should I do with it? That's your choice. But know that speaking at board meetings won't stop this. The decision to change the curriculum was made long before parents had any idea. She started walking away, then turned back. Check the documents about the summer teacher training programs. That's where they're breaking down resistance and recruiting allies. As she disappeared down the path, my phone buzzed. A text from Todd, picking up Zoe early Friday, taking her to my parents for the weekend. A change of plans. We had a custody agreement, and this wasn't his weekend. Before I could respond, another text came through. Don't fight me on this, Ellen. You've upset her enough already with your school crusade. That night, after Zoe went to bed, I examined the flash drive's contents. Rebecca hadn't exaggerated. The documents revealed a coordinated effort to transform the curriculum across multiple subjects. History courses minimizing slavery's horrors and reframing the civil rights movement as largely unnecessary due to natural social progress. Science classes presenting climate change as just one theory, with significant scientific disagreement. Literature classes removing books by diverse authors and replacing them with traditional Western canon. Most disturbing were the emails about narrative management if parents raised concerns. One from Dr. Winters to the board president outlined strategies to isolate and discredit potential opposition by framing objections as politically motivated attacks on academic freedom. My name appeared in a recent email labeled as a priority concern with a note to activate community counter-response. That explained the overwhelming presence of Keller's supporters at the board meeting. I saved copies of everything to multiple locations, then sat staring at my laptop, uncertain of my next move. The local newspaper was mentioned in the emails as a media partner in the initiative, so they wouldn't help. The state education department had recently been restructured with political appointees who might be sympathetic to these changes. My phone buzzed with a text from Jacob. How did the board meeting go? I called him immediately, explaining what I'd learned. He listened in silence, then sighed heavily. This matches patterns we're seeing statewide. These aren't isolated incidents, Ellen. It's a coordinated campaign. What can I do? The local channels are compromised, according to these documents. I have contacts at the Chronicle. He referred to the nearest major city newspaper, about an hour away. They've been investigating similar curriculum changes in other districts. Your evidence could help connect the dots. If I go public with this, what happens to Rebecca? To Zoe? I won't lie to you. There will be blowback. But doing nothing means accepting that your daughter and hundreds of other children will be educated with distorted history and science. After we hung up, I sat in the dark living room weighing my options. The documents provided irrefutable evidence of a coordinated effort to misrepresent history and science to school children, but exposing it would make me an even bigger target, potentially affect my custody arrangement, and certainly cause more strain with Zoe. The next morning, Zoe was unusually quiet at breakfast. Everything okay? I asked. She hesitated. Kaylee said her mom told her you're trying to get teachers fired because you're a communist. I nearly choked on my coffee. What? And Jason said his dad said you hate America and want schools to teach kids to be ashamed of being white. Her voice was small. Is that true, Mom? The absurdity would have been comical if it weren't so effective. No, honey, that's not remotely true. I just want your history classes to teach accurate information. But how do I know what's accurate? Mr. Keller says one thing, you say another. Dad agrees with Mr. Keller. Her confusion was genuine. I reached for her hand. That's a really good question. One way historians determine accuracy is by looking at primary sources, original documents, letters, speeches from the time period. Another is by considering multiple perspectives, especially from people who directly experienced events. Mr. Keller shows us primary sources too. Can you give me an example? He showed us a letter from a slave who said his master was kind, and life on the plantation wasn't that bad. I took a deep breath. Did he show you letters from other enslaved people with different experiences? Or explain how some letters might have been written under duress or by the small minority who had better conditions? Zoe's brow furrowed. No, just that one. That's called cherry picking, selecting only evidence that supports your predetermined conclusion while ignoring contradicting evidence. Real historical analysis looks at the full range of available sources. I could see her processing this, a flicker of critical thinking beneath the confusion. I don't want to fight with you about school, she said finally. Everyone else's parents support Mr. Keller. Why can't you just let it go? The question hit me hard. Because truth matters. Because allowing distortions of history enables repetition of past injustices. Because I want you to understand the complete story of your country, not a sanitized version that serves a political agenda. But all I said was, I love you too much to stay silent when I see something harmful. That afternoon, I contacted the reporter Jacob recommended, Emma Reynolds from the Chronicle. She responded immediately, requesting a meeting. What you're describing matches patterns we've documented in 6 other districts, she said when we met at a cafe halfway between our cities. The same organizations, similar curriculum changes, identical tactics to silence opposition. I handed her a copy of the flash drive. Everything's here. Names, emails, curriculum documents. This is exactly what we've been looking for. Concrete evidence of coordination across districts. The story we're developing goes beyond individual teachers or schools. It's about a systematic effort to reshape how an entire generation understands history, science, and civic responsibility. When would this be published? We're aiming for Sunday's edition, but given what you've provided, we might need more time to verify and incorporate everything. 2 weeks at most. 2 weeks. The school year would be nearly over by then, but the damage to Zoe's education would already be done. There's something else you should know, I said. My ex-husband supports these curriculum changes. We share custody of our daughter, and this has created significant tension. If I'm named in your article, it could affect my custody situation. Emma considered this. We can keep you anonymous in the published piece. A concerned parent provided documents is sufficient, but the school administration will likely figure out the source. I nodded, accepting the inevitability. Just keep my name out of print. The next 2 weeks were a careful balancing act. At home, I tried to engage Zoe in more nuanced conversations about history, without directly contradicting her teacher. With Todd, I avoided mentioning the curriculum entirely during handoffs. At work, I put in extra hours to complete projects ahead of deadlines, anticipating disruption when the story broke. The Facebook group had grown to nearly 50 parents, many sharing new examples of concerning curriculum. A 10th grade biology teacher claiming that evolution was just a theory and giving equal time to creationist explanations. A 6th grade social studies class being taught that climate refugees were making up environmental problems to gain access to wealthy countries. An 8th grade English teacher replacing Mildred Taylor's Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry with a book depicting Reconstruction-era freedmen as unprepared for freedom. We documented everything, sending each new example to Emma. Then came the Friday before the Chronicle's planned Sunday exposé. Zoe had gone to Todd's for the weekend. I was reviewing final designs for a client when my phone rang. Rebecca Donovan. Ellen, something's happened, she said, her voice tense. You need to come to the school. What's wrong? Just come. Now. I drove to Westlake, finding Rebecca waiting by the side entrance. Her face was ashen. They know about the flash drive, she said without preamble. Someone saw us at the park. They've called an emergency staff meeting. Dr. Winters said they've identified the saboteur and will be taking legal action for theft of school property and violation of confidentiality agreements. My stomach dropped. Rebecca, I'm so sorry. No time. They're coming after you too. One of the board members works at the Chronicle. They know about the story. How bad is this going to get? She looked at me directly. They're preparing a counter-narrative, something about you having a history of mental instability and a vendetta against the school because of your divorce. They've been collecting statements from parents and students. That's absurd. I have no history of... It doesn't matter. They're moving to discredit you before the story runs. She glanced at her watch. The meeting starts in 5 minutes. I need to be there, but you needed to know. After she left, I sat in my car, hands shaking as I called Emma. They know about the story, I said when she answered. They're preparing to discredit me as mentally unstable. Damn, she muttered. That's faster than expected. Hang tight. I'll call my editor. We might need to move up publication. I drove home in a daze, wondering how quickly my life was about to unravel. When I arrived, Todd's car was in the driveway. He wasn't supposed to drop Zoe off until Sunday evening. I found him sitting at my kitchen table. Zoe nowhere in sight. Where's Zoe? I asked. With my parents. His voice was cold. We need to talk about your recent behavior. My behavior? What are you... Dr. Winters called me. Apparently, you've stolen confidential school documents and are working with a newspaper to publicly attack the school. He stood, towering over me as he had during our worst arguments. What the hell are you thinking, Ellen? I'm thinking our daughter deserves an education based on facts, not ideology. He scoffed. There you go again, assuming you're the arbiter of truth. Do you have any idea how this could affect Zoe? How humiliated she already feels by your crusade. This isn't about humiliation, Todd. It's about... Save it. He cut me off. I've filed an emergency motion for full custody. Your obsession with this curriculum nonsense demonstrates impaired judgment and is causing Zoe significant emotional distress. The room seemed to tilt. You did what? The hearing is Monday. My lawyer advised me to keep Zoe with my parents until then. He dropped a stack of papers on the table. You've been served. After he left, I fell into a chair, stunned by how quickly everything was escalating. The custody papers cited erratic behavior, political extremism, and using the minor child as a pawn in ideological disputes. Character statements from Lisa Martinez and 3 other Westlake parents described me as unstable, fanatical, and unable to respect differing viewpoints. My phone rang. Emma again. Ellen, we're publishing online tonight and in print tomorrow. The board member tried to kill the story, but we have corroborating evidence from other districts. This is bigger than Westlake now. I barely heard her through my shock. Todd filed for emergency custody. He's keeping Zoe until the hearing on Monday. A long pause. I'm so sorry. Would you prefer we hold the story? That question cut through my fog. If I back down now, everything I'd fought for would be lost. The curriculum would remain unchanged. The truth would stay buried. And what message would that send to Zoe about standing up for what's right? No, I said firmly. Publish it. Just make sure the evidence speaks for itself. That night, I didn't sleep. I reviewed the custody filing with methodical precision, noting every exaggeration and falsehood. I prepared a response detailing my concerns about historical accuracy and documenting the coordinated effort to discredit me. I gathered my own character witnesses, colleagues, longtime friends, Zoe's previous teachers. At 10 p.m., Emma texted, "It's live." The Chronicle's headline read, "Rewriting History. Investigation reveals coordinated effort to alter school curricula across state." The article was meticulous, linking Westlake's curriculum changes to a network of well-funded organizations systematically targeting districts across the state. It quoted extensively from the emails and documents, showing clear intent to misrepresent historical events and scientific consensus. A sidebar detailed the pressure tactics used against teachers and parents who raised concerns. As promised, I wasn't named, referenced only as a concerned parent who provided documentation, but anyone at Westlake would immediately know the source. By morning, the story had been picked up by national outlets. My phone exploded with texts and calls, some supportive, others accusatory. The Facebook group membership doubled, then tripled, as parents from other districts recognized the same patterns in their schools. Rebecca texted, "They're in damage control." Emergency board meeting called for 3 p.m. Amidst the chaos, I focused solely on the custody hearing. While the curriculum battle was important, nothing mattered more than Zoe. I would not lose my daughter over this. Monday morning arrived with a strange calm. I dressed carefully for court, professional but not severe, a mother rather than an activist. My lawyer, Diane Epstein, met me outside the courthouse. "The timing of this filing is suspicious," she said as we walked in. "Judges don't like when custody is used as a weapon. We'll emphasize that your concerns were validated by professional historians and now a major newspaper investigation." Todd and his lawyer were already seated when we entered. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, reviewed the paperwork with an unreadable expression. "Before we begin," she said, "I want to clarify something. This case appears connected to a situation receiving significant media attention. Am I correct that the respondent, Ms. Chen, is the parent referenced in the Chronicle investigation about school curricula?" My lawyer stood. "Yes, Your Honor." Ms. Chen raised legitimate concerns about historically inaccurate material being taught to her daughter. Those concerns have been validated by professional historians and investigative reporting. Todd's lawyer countered, "Your Honor, this case isn't about curriculum. It's about a mother whose obsessive behavior is causing significant emotional distress to her daughter. Ms. Chen has created conflict at school that has made the child a target of unwanted attention. This demonstrates impaired judgment that places the child's emotional well-being at risk." The judge nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. Is the minor child present?" "No, Your Honor," Todd's lawyer replied. "Given the contentious nature of these proceedings, we felt it best to shield her from additional stress." "I believe I need to hear from Zoe directly," the judge said. "This case fundamentally concerns her well-being." An hour later, Zoe entered the judge's chambers, looking small and uncertain. I wanted desperately to hug her, to tell her everything would be okay, but I remained in my seat as instructed. When she emerged 30 minutes later, her eyes were red. She glanced at me briefly before a court officer escorted her out. The pain and confusion in that look nearly broke me. The judge returned to the bench, her expression grave. "I've spoken with Zoe," she began. "She is clearly a bright, thoughtful young woman caught between her parents in a difficult situation. While I understand Mr. Chen's concerns about conflict at school, I find no evidence that Ms. Chen's actions constitute a danger to Zoe's well-being. On the contrary, Zoe expressed admiration for her mother's willingness to stand up for what she believes is right, though she wishes it hadn't created tension with her friends." Relief washed over me. "The emergency petition for change of custody is denied. The existing arrangement will continue." She looked directly at Todd. "Mr. Chen, the court does not look favorably on using custody proceedings as leverage in unrelated disputes. I strongly encourage both parents to shield their daughter from adult conflicts while modeling respectful disagreement." Outside the courthouse, Todd approached me. "This isn't over, Ellen. You've embarrassed me, undermined Zoe's education, and created a circus around our family. I did what I thought was right," I said quietly, "for Zoe and for every student at Westlake. Your righteousness has consequences." He walked away, leaving me with a hollow victory. When I picked Zoe up from Todd's parents that evening, she was subdued. "Are you okay?" I asked as we drove home. She stared out the window. "Everyone at school is talking about the newspaper story. Kaylee's mom called you a communist again, and Mr. Keller wasn't there today. I'm sorry this has been hard for you," I said carefully. "Sometimes standing up for truth comes with difficult consequences. Dad says you care more about being right than about how this affects me." The accusation stung, but I refused to speak badly about Todd. "I care about you more than anything in the world, Zoe. That includes caring about what you're taught and the kind of world you'll grow up in." She was quiet for a long moment. The judge asked if I understood why you were concerned about Mr. Keller's class. "What did you say?" I said I wasn't sure at first, but then I started looking up some of the things he taught us, about slavery and the Civil War. She turned to face me. The stuff online was really different from what he said. My heart swelled with pride. Despite everything, she had sought out information herself. "That's called critical thinking," I said. "Questioning what you're told and looking for evidence." A small smile. That's what the judge said too. The next day, Rebecca called with news. Ryan Keller had resigned. Dr. Winters was on administrative leave pending a district investigation. The school board had called an emergency session to review all recently approved curricula. "Your evidence sparked investigations in 3 other districts," she said. "Teachers who were pushed out for objecting to these changes are considering legal action. It's like dominoes falling." "What about you?" I asked. "Will you be okay?" A long pause. I'm retiring at the end of this year. Can't fight all the battles, but I'll sleep better knowing I fought this one. Over the coming weeks, the district implemented new curriculum review protocols, requiring input from subject matter experts and diverse community members. The parents who had supported Keller's version of history largely retreated from public comment, though I still received occasional glares at school functions. Todd and I established an uneasy truce, both recognizing that our battlefield could not be Zoe's education. He still disagreed with my actions, but had stopped actively undermining me to our daughter. Most importantly, Zoe began asking more questions, not just about history, but about everything she was taught. She developed a healthy skepticism that sought evidence rather than accepting authority without question. One evening, as I helped her with a history project on the civil rights movement, she looked up from her research. "Mom, why is it so important to some people to make bad parts of history seem not that bad?" I considered how to answer. Sometimes people find comfort in believing their country or their ancestors were always on the right side of history. It's easier than confronting uncomfortable truths, but understanding our full history, including mistakes and injustices, is how we learn and improve. She nodded slowly. "I think I get it now. It's like when I mess up but pretend I didn't. I never actually fix the problem that way." Exactly. Nations are the same. We can't address problems we refuse to acknowledge. She returned to her project, and I watched her working with a new sense of peace. The battle over Westlake's curriculum had cost me friendships, created lasting tension with Todd, and briefly threatened my relationship with my daughter. But watching Zoe develop her own critical thinking skills made it worthwhile. The most inaccurate thing my child was taught in school turned out to be the most powerful lesson of all, not about historical facts, but about the courage to stand up for truth, even when it comes at a personal cost.